There is a famous scene in Greece that takes place at a drive-in movie theatre. Danny Zuko attempts to seduce Sandy in a very predatory fashion. Sandy runs away, leaving Danny humiliated and confused. Afterwards, when Travolta's character is singing about being stranded at the drive-in, the filmmaking is used to portray his warped view of romance as an outgrowth of 1950s American society, focusing on the role of media saturation in particular. During the song Sandy, the visual language gestures towards the cultural socialization that produced Danny's misguided attitude. The mise-en-scène offers a cynical perspective, showing us that Danny's problematic attitude towards women, romance, and sex has been fostered by a society that is media-saturated, conformist, confected, infantilizing, violent beneath the surface, and obsessed with instant gratification. As Danny Zuko sings the song, we see the projected screen of the drive-in movie with his shadow cast across it. The opening image on that screen is a cartoon of people rushing headlong towards the movie theatre. This coded gesture anchors the subtext within the collective obsession with mass media that defined America in the 20th century. Danny Zuko and the society that he inhabits flock towards the dream world conjured up by Hollywood studios and advertising agencies. Media saturation is the point being explored most visibly in the subtext. Danny Zuko and his culture are metaphorically stranded at the drive-in, in the sense that they are trapped in a superficial world defined by consuming and reproducing mass media. When Sandy runs away, Danny tells her that she can't just walk out of a drive-in theatre.
Sandy, you just can't walk out of a drive-in!
Danny Zuko subconsciously views mass media society as an inescapable prison. Media saturation is satirized elsewhere in the film. The T-Birds impersonate the Three Stooges, the Pink Ladies know the adverts on TV verbatim, and there is a televised school dance. The following image that we see projected onto the screen is a cartoon of anthropomorphized ice creams marching in a military formation. When deconstructed, this imagery gestures towards a society that beneath an external facade of confection is intensely regimented, both in the sense of being jingoistic and warlike, and in terms of being conformist, homogenized, and afraid to step out of line. American culture in the 1950s, like a row of marching ice creams, appears to be sweet. However, underneath the synthetic ice cream surface, there is a stifling social conformity plus a violent militaristic undercurrent. This paradox is explored elsewhere in the film, notably during the pep rally, where a highly nostalgic view of suburban high school is juxtaposed with visceral tribal hatred. Danny sits on a swing set. This action emphasizes the concept of arrested development in the scene's subtextual critique. The playground imagery connotes the infantilization process that Danny has experienced within the society being critically examined. The swing tells us that Danny's assault of Sandy is rooted in a failure to grow into a mature adult capable of expressing romantic feelings in a healthy way. The wider context of the scene places the responsibility for this immaturity on mass media. The concept of the teenager, an invention of the 1950s, is being commented on with an exacting cynicism that juxtaposes the glossy celebratory pastiche of the era being reproduced throughout the film itself, and the kitschy animation style at the theatre. Before stepping backwards and discussing my interpretation of the scene's broader subtextual meaning, I will present the final semiotic gesture that underpins my analysis. The cartoon on the screen shows a Frankfurter jumping into a hot dog bun in a sort of circus setting. This is an obvious sexual innuendo that introduces the concept of over-sexualization into the satire of pre-countercultural American society. More than this, the circus setting of the innuendo offers a highly developed commentary on the psychology that motivated Danny's assault and that shapes the society around him. The conformist, mass media America of the 1950s socializes men like Danny into perceiving sex as both a performance and a form of cheap entertainment. Sandy, who is Australian and more old-fashioned at this point in the film, does not want to be romantic so publicly and so suddenly. Whereas the American teenagers in the film are considerably less private and the girls are less protective of their boundaries. Teenage girls of the era, according to the satire presented in the cartoon, are buns waiting to be filled rather than consenting sexual partners. Meanwhile, during the era of fads and youth culture, the teenage boys of the 1950s, like circus animals, were forced to perform bizarre social rituals disseminated by media, like going to the drive-in theatre or being greasers, in order to be invited into those buns. Dating in the 1950s was very institutionalised compared to the free love era of the 1960s. In Summer Lovin', we see that Danny wants to use fake stories of sexual conquest to entertain his friends and to make himself the centre of attention, like a performing animal in the circus. The cartoon also alludes to the feminist idea of phallocentrism that is said to have underpinned pre-countercultural sexuality. Feel free to speculate further on any of the elements that I've pointed out so far. To summarise, the cartoon shows three distinct images that comply with a widespread critique of America in the 1950s. People rushing to the cinema, ice creams marching in a military formation, and the hot dog circus act. Plus there is the swing set, the lyrics of the song, and some of the dialogue. The subtext beneath the surface level narrative of the scene is used to comment on the hypocrisy of American 1950s mainstream culture. The cartoon, like the society being satirised, appears to be confected even though it connotes complex themes beneath its surface. Additionally, the scene itself appears to be a loving homage to 1950s teenage culture, while astutely criticising that culture from the margins of the screen. The style adds to the substance because the paradox between confected pastiche and social critique reverberates across different planes of focus. What I mean is that the confected American culture of the 1950s hid social and historical complexities. Grease, the film itself, is a pastiche of that confected culture, hiding narrative complexities. And the cartoon, a kitschy 1950s style animation, hides unlikely thematic complexities that reinforce a subtextual and intertextual narrative. Danny Zuko, although he appears simply to be predatory, is more complicated. Since he is a character in an old film set even further in the past, there's not much point in judging his actions from an ethical perspective. What he did is obviously wrong. However, in the film, the character does seem to be genuinely confused about what made Sandy reject his advances. He sits and wonders, why I? The connotations in the scene illustrate that his confusion is rooted in his cultural socialization. Danny Zuko is metaphorically stranded at the drive-in, whereas Sandy is not. Her attitudes are not shaped by consumption of mass media, unlike her American classmates. By interacting with a partner who exists outside of the dominant social paradigm, Danny's own perceptions are called into question. The mise-en-scène clarifies to the observant viewer exactly what factors have warped Danny's attitude towards women. The media-saturated, infantilizing, conformist society of the 1950s underpins the problematic approach towards romance that defines Danny Zuko and the cultural environment that has nurtured his worst impulses. Out of all the movie scenes making semiotic gestures that I've looked into so far on my channel, this one in Grease is certainly near the top when it comes to obscuring the gesture through drama and immersion in the scene. The music, the cinematography, the performances, the use of the projector light, and even the editing, plus the well-judged balance of cheesiness and seriousness, make the scene so rich just on its surface. The use of Brechtian cinema, however, such as repeatedly breaking the 180 line, indicate that we should be engaging with the scene analytically and examining it critically to see what the film is trying to tell us below its surface. There is, of course, this very important point. Never judge the extent to which a film should be engaged with based on how it is presented. This scene explores the same themes as a David Lynch movie, for example, but most people would fail to recognise it as being high-level cinema because of their preconceived notions about film and genre. Thank you for watching.